Welcome back to the doom and gloom world of Frostpunk. Last time we played, we tried to make a civilization with no humans. This time, our civilization might be plagued with too many humans, since we're playing the Refugees start. Our old civilization was run by a bunch of rich aristocrats who decided that we weren't worth the time or resources and kicked us out. On the way out, we stole what we could to try and make a living for ourselves out in the storm, which is where we're at today. However, there are tales that the rich people are still pretty upset about the stuff that we stole and are on their way to finish the job, meaning we only have 15 days to get our lives together. This means all hands on deck, grabbing as much wood, coal, and steel as possible. But you find out pretty quickly that we don't have enough hands for all this, and people quickly called for the children to work beside them. But given the fact that we're already refugees that rich people tried to kill, I felt kind of bad about putting the kids to work, so I decided to be more appropriate to put them in a daycare, which luckily seemed to appease the other citizens who thanked me for not putting them to work. However, the workload concerns were still very real and would require some sort of solution. If it wasn't going to be children, it had to be something. So I decided to build 2 gathering posts. This meant that we could get the same amount of supplies with less workers. And with less workers in the mines, this meant we could put them somewhere else more useful, like research. So I quickly built a workshop and got to work on researching a balloon. This balloon would allow the other refugees behind us to find our city more easily out in the deadly storm. But not everyone needed this, as other refugees were still slowly pouring in, even without the balloon, appearing on the cliffs outside our civilization. They also told stories of other refugees that were not as lucky and got trapped further out in the storm, which meant that building our balloon was a major priority now, and we had it up and running very soon, allowing us to make a scout team and begin looking for the survivors. Luckily, they were still alive, hunkered down behind a snowbank. After returning them to home safely, we were back on the road looking for supplies. But it would still take a while to get the supplies back, which meant more research back home on renewable resources like coal mines and sawmills. But coal and wood weren't our only concerns. I didn't realize just how many people we had already gotten and how little food we had to feed them all. I spent all our wood on hunters' huts, hoping that it'd be enough to feed everyone. But of course, more people showed up. I'm beginning to see the problem with a society of outcasts that lets anyone in. You end up letting a lot of people in. And we had gone from a couple dozen people to over 80 in just a couple days. But I was quickly reminded that I should be thankful to even have 80 people here, because some others were not as lucky. Apparently this engineer was cursed, which hopefully doesn't follow us because I definitely stole his steam core. Which hopefully doesn't follow us.
12 seconds later.
Yeah, never mind, we definitely got the curse. The weather immediately got worse, even more people showed up, and they kept on asking for food that I didn't have, which means that when I told them no, it made my people very angry. I mean, could I even blame them? We were consuming way more food than we were making, meaning that everyone was starving. And way too many people were showing up at our doors, ruining our infrastructure and causing people to sleep out in the cold, which also meant that they were getting sick. Even if you were lucky enough to have a tent to sleep in, it wouldn't matter, because our coal production was so bad that our generator was constantly turning off, forcing people to sleep out in the cold. I just don't understand how I have so many people, but I also feel like I have nobody. This is because people aren't actually available to work. Putting those kids in a daycare was probably the worst decision I'd ever made. Thankfully, the weather was warming up the next day and took some pressure off the generator, allowing us to catch up on our coal production. Unfortunately, that night was still brutal, causing a large chunk of people in our society to die overnight. But on the bright side, that was less mouths to feed, and with them gone and soup legalized, it was kind of possible that we could recover our food situation, which meant that things were starting to look up. I built more homes, opened up more sick clinics, and felt like a good leader. Until even more refugees showed up. This time, prevailing stories of the rich people trailing behind them. There wasn't really much I could do to stop them from being followed by the rich people, so I just kept my head down, gathering resources, conducting research, and saving the leftover refugees until eventually we had saved them all. Now all we had to do was expand our infrastructure once again to handle this massive income of people. However, it seems that I just don't know how to do that, as the numbers at the bottom of my screen were just getting worse and worse. It got so bad at one point that the people of my city threatened to overthrow me. they were quite literally hopeless. But even if they hated me, I did what I was supposed to do, and I let the final groups of refugees in. I had done my job, and even if the people hated me, I had successfully completed the game. Except, I didn't? All this fanfare and the big success screen, and for some reason I was still looking at my civilization, and people were still pissed at me. I did my best to satiate their every need, but they wanted so much from me. They asked me to build a medical post, I did. They asked me for a place to pray, I built it. They're upset about being homeless, I built them homes. But I guess that just wasn't good enough for them. They didn't even finish building the roads to their houses. They just quit right there in the streets and kicked me out for an eternity. As a leader, I owed these people nothing. All they did was beg me for food and housing and then yell at me. But as a gamer, I didn't want to be bested by this level. So I came back the next day and used my first act as the supreme leader to enslave all children. It was clear that survival would require difficult decisions. This time I focused more on research in the beginning and put a way bigger focus on housing everyone. Giving them a tent was quicker and cheaper than trying to treat 100 sick people later on. And after a lot of grinding and catching up, pretty soon we were back at the fake victory screen. What a tease. At least I was doing better this time around, with much less sick people. But the reality of our situation was that we had not beaten the game or won anything. In fact, the hardest challenge had yet to come, because there was a group of lords on their way, and based on previous behavior, they were probably coming to finish off the job. However, once we got a better look at them, it didn't seem like they had any guns at all. In fact, it seemed like the opposite. These people might have needed our help, but there was 100 of them. 100. I just simply couldn't handle that. I almost would have preferred that they just showed up with guns instead. But adding 100 people to our ecosystem would be just as devastating. So sadly, I turned them away. But this didn't stop them much, as they decided to set up a camp outside of our walls, and even came back a couple days later asking us for food. And as much as I would have liked to help them, I had a society that was pissed off at me, and helping them was just gonna make things worse. So unfortunately, I had to tell them no again. And before I knew it, another group of lords had shown up at my door. However, these ones had taken even longer to get here and had gotten sick on the way. I wanted to turn them away, but the other group had made me feel so bad that we had to take this one in to make amends for the first group. So I let them in. However, at this point, my promises were beginning to pile up. I had put my hands in way too many pots. The only way I was going to be able to take care of all this was if I distracted people with religion, using prayer to solve all of our problems. But unfortunately, even prayer was not enough to overcome the generator turning off once again. I guess it's pretty hard to pray when you have frostbite. And, as always, a coup was started against me again, this time out of anger, which was fair, honestly. But at the same time, what was I supposed to do? 250-something people are sick, they're still eating our food, but they're too sick to go to work and earn their rations. And I was literally running out of room on the map to even house the other 100 people. People were so upset that they even started killing each other in the streets, which meant it was only logical that I legalized killing each other and took credit for what they were already doing. Finally, the last group of lords showed up. This one was being led by Lord Craven himself, the very same man who had originally kicked us out and shot at us. But now he arrived empty-handed, trailing behind him a bunch of children. I honestly just didn't trust a supervillain who has a bunch of kids with him. It seems too much like a gimmick. So I sent them away, which in my defense was immediately justified when we got word that Lord Craven and the others were planning an attack against us, meaning that we would have to reinforce our outpost with guarded lookout towers. But these towers would never get to go up, because despite all my work, the people of my city were still not very happy with me. They mocked me and banished me from the society, claiming that this was better than the death sentence, although sending me off in the storm alone wasn't much different from a death sentence. Honestly, I had a lot of fun playing this version of the game, but my god is it hard. This was nothing like the other two campaigns. And if you've beaten this mode, leave me a comment telling me how you did it, or if you think I should give this another try. For now, I hope you enjoyed the video, and have a great day.